Hello, students, and a very warm welcome to all of you. Today, we're going to dive into a really funny story from your Class 9 textbook, Moments. The story is called The Adventures of Toto. And it's written by one of our most beloved authors, Ruskin Bond. Now, I'm sure many of you have read his stories before. He has this wonderful way of telling simple stories that are just so captivating, and he often writes about his own life in the beautiful hills of India. So the story kicks off with a really interesting question. Have you ever had a baby monkey as a pet? I mean, think about it. It's not a pet you see every day, is it? Not like a cat or a dog. This question is designed to make you curious right from the start. What would it be like to have a monkey at home? Would it be fun? Mischievous? Maybe a little bit of both? Well, let's find out together. All right, so here's our plan for today. First, we'll meet Toto the monkey. Then we'll look at the secret he was in the house. After that, we'll join him on his adventure to Saharanpur. Then there's the story of the bath that almost turned into a boil. And finally, the big Palau incident. And of course, at the very end, we'll do a quick recap for your exams. Okay, let's get started with part 1, Meet Toto the monkey. So our story really begins with the narrator's grandfather. Now, this grandfather was a man who absolutely loved animals. And one day, he brings home a very unusual new family member. You see, grandfather didn't just have one or two pets. He had his own little private zoo right at home, a whole collection of animals. So one day, he spots this little red monkey, Toto. And where does he see him? Tied to a feeding trough by a Tonga driver. Grandfather just felt that the poor monkey looked so out of place, so unhappy, and so he decided he had to have him. He bought Toto for just 5 rupees to add him to his zoo. Now, the author says Toto was a pretty monkey. But what does he mean by a pretty? Let's break it down. His eyes were bright, and you could just see the mischief sparkling in them. His teeth, pearly white. But his smile was so big and mischievous that it actually used to frighten some of the elderly ladies. And then there was his tail. His tail was very special. The author says it was like a third hand for him. He could use it to hang from a branch or even to pick up something he couldn't reach with his hands. Quite a useful tail, don't you think? Okay, this brings us to a really important part of the story, the big difference between grandfather and grandmother. They were complete opposites when it came to animals. Grandfather, as we know, loves animals. He finds their cleverness and their mischief really amusing. But grandmother? Oh no, she was not a fan. She liked her house to be neat and tidy, and a new pet always meant a big fuss. So this is the main conflict you see, and it's exactly why grandfather knew that Toto's arrival had to be a secret, at least for a little while. So, a secret monkey in the house? How do you think that's going to go? Well, let's see. In part 2, A Secret in the House, we find out Toto is hidden away in a little closet in the narrator's bedroom. And, it doesn't take very long for his true colors to show. So just a few hours pass, and when grandfather and the narrator come back to check on Toto, what a sight they see. Just look at this quote. The beautiful wallpaper on the walls, gone. Just naked brick and plaster left. The peg in the wall that he was tied to, he had pulled it right out of its socket. And the narrator's school blazer, his poor blazer, was torn into shreds. The mischief had officially begun. Now, listen carefully to what happens next. You would think grandfather would be angry, right, about the wall, the blazer, but no, he wasn't angry at all. In fact, he seemed pleased. He said, he's clever. He even joked that if they had given Toto more time, he would have tied the pieces of the blazer into a rope and escaped. This tells you so much about grandfather's character. He was more impressed by Toto's intelligence than he was upset by the destruction. Well, clearly keeping Toto in a closet was not going to work, so he was moved to a big cage in the servants' quarters, where grandfather's other pets lived. There was a tortoise, a pair of rabbits, a tame squirrel, a nice little group. But do you think Toto lived peacefully with them? Of course not. He was such a troublemaker that he didn't let any of the other animals sleep all night. So now grandfather has a problem. Toto is causing trouble with the other pets, and grandfather has to go to Saharanpur to collect his pension. So what does he decide to do? He decides to take Toto with him. And this, my dear students, is where the Saharanpur adventure begins. A monkey on a train. So how do you secretly take a monkey on a train? Well, grandfather had a plan. He got a big black canvas bag with a zipper on top and put Toto inside. Simple, right? But Toto was not the kind of monkey to just sit quietly. On the crowded railway platform, the bag started jumping up and down, rolling around. You can just imagine all the people staring at this mysterious jumping bag. But the real drama, the real fun, starts when they get to Saharanpur. So there's grandfather producing his ticket to the ticket collector, and just at that moment, what does Toto do? He pops his head out of the bag and gives the ticket collector a huge monkey grin. The poor man was so startled, and he immediately says, "Sir, you have a dog with you. You have to pay for it." Grandfather tried to explain, No, it's not a dog, it's a monkey." But the ticket collector wouldn't listen. He insisted it was a dog, and so he made grandfather pay a fare for Toto, 3 rupees. Now, grandfather was quite annoyed by this, so just to make a point, he took his pet tortoise out of his pocket and said, "All right then, how much should I pay for this?" And this is the best part. The ticket collector looked down at the tortoise, peered at it closely, and then he looked up at grandfather with this big, triumphant smile and said, "No charge, sir. It is not a dog." Can you see how funny and ironic that is? The rule was about dogs, and he followed it so literally that the whole situation became completely absurd. It's a perfect example of situational humor. So, after the train adventure, grandmother finally found out about Toto, and she accepted him into the family. So Toto was given a nice home in the stable. But does that mean his mischief stopped? Not at all. In this next part, we'll see how his cleverness and his curiosity could actually be quite dangerous. Now, in the stable, Toto had a companion, the family donkey, whose name was Nana. You would hope they would become friends, right? Well, with Toto, nothing is ever that simple. On the very first night, grandfather went to check on them, and what did he find? He found Toto biting Nana's long ears with his sharp little teeth. Poor Nana. It was very clear that Toto and Nana were never, ever going to be friends. And now, we come to one of the most famous and most dangerous of Toto's adventures, the kettle incident. See, Toto loved his warm baths in the winter. Grandmother would give him a big bowl of warm water, and he was so clever, he would test the temperature with his hand, just like he had seen humans do. So one day, he sees a large kitchen kettle on the fire for making tea. And what does he do? Step 1, he takes off the lid. Step 2, he tests the water. It feels nice and warm. Step 3, he gets right inside for a bath. But then, the water starts to get hotter. It begins to boil. He tries to stand up, but the air outside is cold, so he sits back down. He keeps hopping up and down until, thank goodness, grandmother comes in and pulls him out, half-boiled. This story really shows us how an animal can be intelligent enough to imitate, but not wise enough to understand the danger. You know, the author says that if there's a part of the brain just for mischief, then in Toto, that part was very, very big. And this next incident, the Palau incident, this was the one that really was the final straw. This was the moment the family realized that maybe Toto was just too wild to be a pet. So picture this. It's lunchtime. The family walks into the dining room, and who do they see? Toto, sitting on the dining table, stuffing his face with rice from the big dish of Palau. Grandmother screams at him, and what does he do? He throws a plate at her. An aunt tries to help, and he throws a glass of water right in her face. Then he grabs the whole dish of Palau, escapes through a window, and climbs up a big jackfruit tree. He sat there and ate every last grain of rice. And then, just to annoy grandmother, he threw the dish down and it smashed into 100 pieces. He was chattering with joy when it broke. You see, this wasn't just an accident. It was deliberate mischief. And that, right there, was the turning point. After seeing the broken dish and Toto's deliberate defiance, even grandfather had to admit that this couldn't go on. Toto was not the kind of pet they could keep. You have to remember, they were not a very rich family. They just could not afford to keep buying new dishes, new clothes, new curtains, and fixing the wallpaper all the time. The cost of Toto's mischief was just getting too high.
So that's the story of Toto. It's very funny, but it's also quite chaotic, isn't it? So what are the main things we can learn from it? Let's move on to our final section, our lessons and exam recap, where we'll go over the key takeaways that will be very useful for you.
Okay, let's talk about the key themes. What is the story really about? Well, first, it's about affection for animals. We see that clearly in grandfather. But a very important lesson here is that some animals are wild by nature, and they just cannot be tamed. The story also shows us that there's a limit to everyone's patience, even grandfather's. And finally, and this is very important, it's about being a responsible pet owner. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for an animal is to realize that your home is not the right place for it.
All right, for your exams, this little table will be a great help. If a question asks for a character sketch of Toto, you can say he was mischievous, clever, and imitative, but also very destructive. He really represents the wild spirit that can't be tamed. For grandfather, you can write that he was an animal lover, very patient and indulgent, but he learned a practical lesson in the end. And grandmother, she was the practical one, the voice of reason who liked order in the house. Remembering these points will really help you structure your long answers.
And so, we'll end with a question for you to think about. Grandfather eventually sold Toto back to the same Tonga driver, but this time for only 3 rupees. He actually lost money. So, was his decision a failure? Did he fail to tame a pet? Or was it an act of love and responsibility? Do you think he realized that Toto would be happier and his family would be safer if the little monkey didn't live with them? It's a great question to reflect on. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful.